Hey everyone, welcome to Friday's edition of Hashtag Malkin Live. I've got a really special guest today. We're going to talk all things cancel culture, and we're going to talk about my guest's books. It's Denise McAllister. She is the publisher of Real Romans 1. We'll talk to you more about her website and what the intention is and the agenda for Romans 1. She's also the author of What Men Want to Say to Women But Can't, and she is a co-author of the New York Times bestseller Spygate, the attempted sabotage of Donald Trump. I'm going to bring her in right now. Hey Denise, it's Denise McAllister. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I wanted to start out with a thread that you did, and we're really gonna get into a lot of the things that you don't hear talked about, and there's a lot of reasons why people don't talk about it. But of course, our mutual friend Mike Adams passed away last week, and you did a heartfelt thread on. You had said that you'd refrain from saying anything about his suicide. And mentioned that he had supported you when your own life was literally threatened for something you tweeted. And so I'm going to hand it off to you and have you talk about your experience with Mike.
Well, Mike was always a great supporter. And one thing he always believed in was free speech. And he, no matter if it was offensive, he would even go to his own protest. People who protest because he believed in free speech, and he was quite honest. He was conservative. He saw what the mob culture was doing, the PC culture, and he spoke out against it, boldly against it. No matter who you were, he would challenge you, and he would bring out how the PC identity culture, council culture was working. And he was attacked. He was attacked at his university. He was a professor of criminology at UNC Wilmington, which isn't far from where I am. And he spoke out. And he was attacked for this viciously and called a racist, a homophobe, a bigot. And when he challenged a Muslim girl who said she was going to a rally and basically implied, she's going to kill people and hopefully she would come out surviving. He challenged her on that in a humorous way. He didn't call for her to be cast out or anything like that. He just called her on the carpet for what she was doing and what she was saying, which was evil. And he was fired for his Twitter, his social media post. UNC Wilmington said, you can't do this. And they canceled him. This was devastating to him. And it came at a time, I think people need to understand this, when we're all so isolated by COVID anyway. And this really weighed on him. I think a speaking tour or speaking conference that he was supposed to be at that he really enjoyed had been canceled as well. So he was at home alone. He lost his job. He lost something that meant teaching students, that meant a lot to him, speaking out. And you understand this, when you're designed by God to speak truth, to speak out, to have that burden on you that weighs on you. And it really does on people like us when we see things and we discern things in the culture, where it's almost a compulsion to speak out, for liberty, for freedom, for truth, and boldly do it. And he was one of those people. And to isolate and shut down someone like that, to cut off I don't think it was a money issue. It probably wasn't even a pride issue about his job. It was the opportunity to do what he was called to do. It's like being gutted, to have that taken away. And then in the midst of this COVID isolation, and the police determined that he took his own life. And, it touched me because I had been there. And, I don't know how he struggled up to those days beforehand. I can imagine, because I understand what that isolation and loss and grief and to lose your calling and to lose your voice, what that feels like. And how, and it doesn't matter how much he offended people. It does not justify ripping out a person's soul, a person's livelihood, a person's calling in life because you're offended. He's not calling for you to be silenced. I'm not calling for anyone to be silenced. You haven't. We may criticize people, but we don't call for people to be silenced. Yes. And, that's the difference. And when you silence people, it's very dehumanizing. And if you struggle, if you're an emotional type, if you're a sensitive type, if you struggle with mental illness, I struggled with childhood PTSD and I have my whole life. it can break you. It can just drive you to a hopeless space. And that can happen even if you're a Christian.
Yes.
Even if you're a believer. And people need to understand that Christians are not immune from momentary despair. They're not immune from mental illness. They're not immune from those broken moments in life, just as we're not immune from sinning.
Yes. Yes. I think that's so important, because there is a certain faction of, it's not just Conservatism Inc. I'm talking about, but sort of writ large, the conservative movement, people who consider themselves people of faith, that somehow it is a flaw or a moral defect to admit that you have struggles with mental health. And I remember reading, I was so mad, maybe it was a year or two ago, in the New York Post op-ed section, a really snide piece targeted at young people who, right, you know what the trope is, right? That Generation Z is a bunch of snowflakes. And, I kind of glommed onto that. It was so really easy to blame K through 12 and university education for producing a generation of snowflakes, and then to pretend that mental health is not an issue it doesn't matter what your ideology is, it doesn't matter what your faith is, and to have this very snotty retort that, well, if you just prayed more, then you'd be fine. Yeah. How do you respond to that?
That's so works oriented. We always gravitate to that. There's something I need to do to earn forgiveness, to earn grace, to earn salvation, to be saved. As if an action of mine can rip apart what Christ has done for us on the cross. Once the imputation of his righteousness has been put upon you, nothing, not even you and your own despair, can take that away. And we need to understand that is the love and the power of our God for those he's brought into his kingdom. And we can be assured of that. That doesn't mean we go on sinning so that grace may abound, but it's a comfort to us. And so when Mike died and took his life, I understood it, because I'd been there. And, after I had been deplatformed, I had my own breakdown from my PTSD. One thing, if anyone knows anything about that, fight and flight is a big part of when you feel threatened, when you feel stressed, especially when you're triggered in the true sense of the word, psychologically.
Yes, exactly.
You fight and then you flight, and one of the biggest flights is suicide. And so, I had to be. And my family had to call the hospital. I had to call the cops and had to have me taken, and I was hospitalized for a time after it all happened that night. So I understood that impulse and how you're put into that position of isolation when you're so used to speaking publicly. You've got to understand, this isn't pride or wanting status or, oh, just get over it, you lost your job. It's not about that. It's you're supposed to be speaking, and then you've had that ripped away for no good reason, except that someone was offended by what you said, when you yourself fight for people to say things even though it's offensive to you.
Exactly. It's existential, really. And so the derision and the mockery that results after somebody says this is unfair just compounds it even more, right? Oh, well, maybe there is something wrong with me. Why am I whining about it? I've talked about this with Laura Loomer, and I think that there are very few people who've been able to withstand the derision and the sarcasm and just the bile. It is bile that's aimed. I mean, I don't know if there's a gender component to it, and we can get into that in a bit here too. But when she, in the immediate aftermath of her deplatforming, she had a public appearance. I think it was on the Alex Jones show, and she broke down. And, this was just, this was considered some sort of mortal sin to say, I'm mourning. I have a sense of grief here because something has been unjustly taken away from me. I want to talk specifically about this because you mentioned this in your thread, that Mike Adams had come to your defense because you've battled this cancel culture multiple times. Can you talk about the tweet that led to that attempt to cancel you?
Yeah, I've had my life threatened a couple of times, the ultimate cancel.
Right. Sure.
I've had calls for my deplatforming. I mean, even before I was deplatformed, my publishers were pressured often, get that racist, off of the Federalist or off of Daily Wire, get her off of there because she's speaking out in a way, for America that's somehow racist. You know how that goes. And so, but the threat that got me, I had to call the FBI on this one, was I had tweeted about abortion. And just the feminist hatred of motherhood and the feminist hatred of being a mom and being designed and how we are as women. And just the love of being able to have unresponsible sex. And I don't mean by that not having birth control, but just not understanding the purpose of sex. And that they, killing a baby just so that you can have your lust fulfilled. I know I sound puritanical, but anyway, so this is what I wrote. I actually had my life threatened for this. Had to call the cops, had to call the FBI, and the deluge I got, and how the mob on Twitter for that, it was just gross. It was disgusting and constant, and the threats and the language thrown at me on a daily basis. And people found my emails. I don't even know how people find your emails, but I was getting it there. And so he came to my defense. And he was always there to defend free speech.
He was. Yes, he was. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's because he did the same thing with me as well, and that just shows you. I mean, it's such a contrast between somebody who was a true blue defender of free speech, no matter what, no matter how offensive, no matter how acerbic. And last fall, after Yaf went after me, and we can talk about all that too. He said, "There's no way I would have fired you. No way in hell." He said, and just plain, just like, no artifice about it, no performative aspect to it. And so that was very meaningful because he did that publicly with you as well to defend you.
Well, and he wasn't ashamed of the association. And this is one of the problems with the cancel mentality is, I can't be associated. It's almost a Victorian reflex against, something that we find offensive. And who's going to think bad of me because of it? And what are they going to take away from me because of my association with this person who might be a racist because of one thing she said or he said, or even worse, who she might have associated with. It's ridiculous. He publicly, was very defensive and defended those who were attacked in this way, because one thing he understood is context. And the cancel culture emulates the left when it's on the right happening. And it's a reductionistic way of looking at an event, a person, a situation. There's no context. It's just, what were the words that were said or who was associated with, and was it offensive? And instead of like, well, maybe I'm associating with this person, not because I agree with everything that they say, but because we agree on some really good, important points that I want to advocate, that I want to stand strong for, that we need to stand strong for as a country. And we need some warriors in the battle.
Yes.
How about that context? Or maybe a context like in my situation, I was being attacked for a week, for a whole day. I had people calling cops against my husband under false accusations of a domestic abuse.
Oh,
all because I made a joke, a feminist joke about not interrupting him during the game. Kind of like remember how Phyllis Schlafly used to come in and said, "Oh, my husband let me out to come speak."
Yes.
I used to do that all the time. Like, "Oh, my husband let me out." I interrupted him during the game. Sorry, honey, I'll get you your beer.
Right.
And when people say, "Well, when you speak that way, you should just accept that you're going to get backlash." Well, yeah, sure. You and we know. I mean, I get so much backlash on a daily basis. I know, but it's different when your family is attacked. Nothing justifies calling cops and social services against a man that's been falsely accused.
Yes.
Nothing justifies that. I don't care what you're going to say. And in Yashar Ali, the guy I got into a tangle with, was leading these band of warriors all along the way, and mocking my heterosexual relationship, mocking my husband. Saying, "Oh, Denise," that followed a whole string of other tweets that, of course, the context was missing.
Yes.
Of, you're being abused and you don't know it. I had people say, "Oh, you may not realize it, but a lot of women do like being abused. So maybe she likes it." It was just a constant, the misogyny coming real.
Yes.
coming out in that. And, and I fired off, I got angry and I fired off a tweet, but the tweet wasn't all together untrue. I was on Milo's show and Milo was like, what's wrong with that tweet? It's kind of true.
It's true. Right.
We are looking for meaning in gay sex, go on. Yeah. And so, but immediately it was like, what you said, like Ben Shapiro said, what you said, Denise, is against all human decency. And I'm like, do you know what the context of this was? And I'm actually talking about something that is an act that's not all that decent in itself, according to God's design for human sexuality. Sorry if that offends you guys, but it's true. And if you don't think it's true, fine, but I have the right to speak it without being deplatformed.
Yes.
And the fact that I used a cuss word was not an issue on that because it's Twitter.
Right. The context
it was the nature of offending a sacred cow in our culture today, and immediately gone. No context, your situation, no context. Also, Michelle, especially in your situation, here's a woman who has contributed more to the conservative movement than the people who canceled you. And I'm going to say to all those little twits, this woman has invested years for the conservative cause. She has written books. She has been out there in the front line. She has been on television. She's been on radio. She has put blood, sweat, and tears. Her family has sacrificed for her to have this career, for her to speak the truth. And she has done more for conservatism than any of you on your little bright and shiny stages will do today.
Thank you.
You cancel her because you don't like who she's associating with for good reasons, even though you don't like them. Yeah. These little millennial spats that you guys have are pathetic. And your treatment of Michelle was pieces of crap. And because she has given more to our movement, the very things that you say you fight for, than any of you could ever dream of. And yet in a moment, because you've got your power, you've got your investors, you've got your big microphones, and you've got people wrapped around your finger, and everyone's terrified of associations, and you're playing the game of the left in canceling and delegitimizing those you don't like, who aren't part of your little clique. It's all built in there together. You decide to shut her down. And in doing that, falsely accuse and malign her character. Yeah. It's evil and it's wrong and it needs to stop.
Amen.
So strong. She has not been defeated by it. And she won't be.
Thank you. It's Wonder Twin powers here. Right back at you, Denise. And I'm in a position now where I look back, on my entire career, and I wish that I could have been there more for you. I wish I could have done more. And it's like, we're all sort of just under constant attack, and we're just trying to keep our own heads above water. It's a disgrace. And, the particular pathology of these conning people that we've both had to deal with is that they immediately run to the likes of a Yashar Ali. I'm like, what? Who is this character? What is it?
Canceling. He's doing it constantly.
Right. And that is his full-time job. And he would not be nearly as effective as he is if not for the approbation, promotion, and conspiracy with some people who are supposed to be on our side. And then I can't remember if it was you who sent me this. These jokers continuing to deny that the right engages in cancel culture. Yeah. I know that I can when my ears are burning because I'm thinking I can hear Denise laughing all the way across the coast. How does that even cognitive dissonance even work with them? How do you function like that?
Well, I think a couple of ways that they justify it in their minds is I think they tell themselves they didn't cancel us. I mean, I've heard things like, people can fire whoever they want, they can do, they can invite whoever they want. I was supposed to be going to an ADF, an Alliance Defending Freedom. Conference, right? That a few months after I was deplatformed, and I was set in to go. A day after I was deplatformed, they write me and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We're gonna have to disinvite you. We can't have you. Oh, because we wanted someone from the Federalists, and now you're not there. So we're not gonna have you." I'm like,
oh wow.
Okay. That was never the reason that they said that they invited me. But these people, they just do these balls. They tell themselves all these things. I really just fired you. I didn't deplatform you. I didn't cancel you. I just uninvited you. Oh, because you weren't on a checklist anymore that I had. They find all kinds of excuses to tell themselves, I didn't cancel you.
Yeah.
And they even have the right. No one's questioning the rights of any of these groups or individuals to not have you on their platforms or anything like that. It's not about that right. It's about why you got rid of them and how you're feeding a cancel culture that is being driven by the left. But part of the effort of the left is to get the right to deplatform itself, to label itself, to stigmatize itself. Because the left can't win without the useful idiots. The left can't win. The whole driving push here is to delegitimize the right. And Media Matters, George Soros, all of these groups, that is their goal. That's their leftist goal, is delegitimization. Yeah. And what better way to do that than to get your own to delegitimize you? Yes. And that's what they do. It's like in Nazi Germany. It's in all kinds of totalitarian regimes across human history. It is turning your own against you. And that's why you and I are fighting this. It's not because we're bitter. We're not angry. We're not sour grapes. We're not able to let it go.
I love that one.
Just let it go.
Right, let it go. Although we're the ones that live rent free in these people's heads, right? I mean,
let it go. Even though it's happening all the time, and they don't understand. If this were a minor thing, yeah, let it go. But this is part of a culture. This is a part of an issue that's big and happening, and it's part of a movement to delegitimize the right. And what we're saying is, stop it. Yes. And we're not the ones you're not bringing division to the right by doing that. I hear this a lot too, like, stop criticizing your own.
Yes. I'm like,
dears, I'm not criticizing our own. I'm talking to the people who've actually gotten rid of their own.
Yes, okay? Exactly.
Stop. Stop doing that.
We didn't start the fire, right?
No, we did not.
Yeah. And so these institutions like now the Daily Wire, the Bulwark, this is a conspiracy theory that is a conspiracy truth. These people, are almost literally in bed with the likes of Jared Holt and Right Wing Watch and, I guess by 1 degree removed, SPLC and ADF. But so many, I hate to use like the derisive term, like normies, they still don't get it. And we spend our time trying to illuminate this. And, it's so invaluable that you use your Twitter account to call these people out every single day because they think they can get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not just their associations, not far removed from these other more leftist organizations.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's even more just their own little cliques and their own little groups they want approval and status from, this in-group dynamic. And, I'm saying, just they don't want to offend their friends. It's very, I guess what I'm saying, it's very culturally, socially driven, as well as just, having a different kind of ideology. This is the other way that they kind of deny the canceling on the right in their own heads, is they're like, well, I'm a conservative. I fight for conservatism every day. How dare you criticize me? And I'm like, well, yeah, you do in a lot of ways. Wonderful. But in some ways you don't. And they're usually in the moral realm. They're usually in the social association realm. Mm-hmm. That's where the left gets you. It's through that, you have certain things that you need to be protecting within PC identity politics. Don't let your people around you violate that, or you'll be stained as being, judgmental, or you'll be stained as being a white nationalist, which is the big bugaboo. Never mind that you sin in a billion other different ways, but that one's going to send you straight to ideological political hell there.
Yes, exactly.
So, and again, and even that's just the label, not even the truth of it. Like Bill Buckley said, we throw around racism all the time now. We don't even know what it is when it stares us in the face. Yes. So it's just this kind of manipulation that's driven by all kinds of different threads. And justifications that go on. And of course, money is a big part of it.
Money is a huge part of it. That's exactly mm-hmm. right. You worked for many of these publications. You worked for The Federalist, mm-hmm. and then you wrote for Daily Wire.
And PJ Media.
And PJ Media. What's your assessment of those publications? in terms of, because the how I think of your unique position is, you're a Christian conservative and you mean it. And there's this, especially among the DC institutions, this secular neoliberalism that cloaks itself in faith. Was that your experience as well?
It's interesting. The 3 different sites that I worked at, I would like to comment on each one of them respectfully, but truthfully. Let me start with PJ Media because it was the most minor one. I didn't write for them as often. I wasn't known for PJ Media, but I wrote there quite often. I think they struggle. I think they struggle to do and write the right things for conservatism. I think they struggle to be Christian, to write Christian viewpoints. I think they have a lot of funding issues, and so they're constantly trying not to get deplatformed themselves or to lose funding. So I think they're in that. You know how it is now. It's very hard. With advertising and stuff like that, to be able to stay there. Like I had a lot of my commentary at PJ Media removed, my commentary on porn removed because their advertisers didn't like that I talked about porn and thought it was explicit. So therefore it all had to go, and which is silencing in its own way, because then you can't criticize porn industry because you can't mention porn because then you're put into a different category. So I think PJ Media struggles a lot because it's so advertising based, or at least it was a year ago. They also didn't deplatform me immediately, along with the others. They did it quietly a few months later. A little more cowardly. I'm going to be honest with you about that, but it was later. The Daily Wire I didn't work with as long, but I knew the people. These groups all interact. Writers really overlap in different places, and I think they're the classic fighting the ideological, political, and basic conservative values, and every once in a while they'll talk about Christian values, but that's not the mainstay. They'll violate the cultural, political, and cultural, religious, moral frame. And I often criticize them for example, I'm just going to have to say it, they're big in supporting and defending homosexuality, not transgenderism, but homosexuality itself. They don't, and so they're very critical, and were critical of me when I would be writing something to bring people a greater awareness of why this is problematic. Not that we don't support homosexual people as persons, love them, and that they can have a voice. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about accepting homosexuality as a sexual identity, as if God had designed it to be that way. That subjectivism is an injection of wrong thinking that affects everything else. It really does cause the dominoes to start falling when you bring a subjective view to morality. And that's, homosexuality is just one example, but a subjective view to morality. And I think that this ties into the very millennial nature of that crew. Millennials are very morally, not very committed. They don't understand the true fundamental reasons why we need to hold on to objective truth and objective value and objective morality. Yes. They're relativist in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So I think that there's a moral relativism that is there. That does not mean that they don't do a lot of good stuff for the conservative movement, and I want their voice to keep going and out there. But that undercuts a lot of the liberty talk that they have.
Yes.
Because you can't have true liberty if you don't have moral objectivity and moral commitment to those objective foundations of human nature. Because our identity as we're made in God as moral creatures is the foundation for the very rights that we have. Our rights come from God because our identity comes from God. And if we throw our identity out into the subjective realm and say we can be and do and act however we want, you have no basis for those objective rights, because it's built on the identity that God has created.
Right.
The Federalist, I have to tell you this, you're going to find this interesting. I don't know if you heard this, but it was my understanding at the time when all this happened over a year ago, that the Federalist wanted me out. I had a conversation with someone at the Federalist that night, and I was being pressured, I felt, to leave. We know how this goes. Anytime, they don't want to fire you.
Yeah, right. I know.
I guess. They don't want to say those words. And so we ended the conversation. I kind of ended like, well, I guess I'm going my own way as far as me dealing with all of this by myself.
Right.
And I felt very frustrated because I thought at the time, and you probably felt this way too with a lot of people, I thought I would have their back. They would have my back.
Yeah.
I was shocked by how many people on my side who I thought were moral, good, Christian, conservative people did not see the context of what was happening, show a little grace to me, and have my back in this. So I kind of left that conversation. Then I woke up the next morning to headlines from, good grief, New York Times to the UK Daily Mail. Why is this world news? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's so important to deplatform conservatives.
Yes, it serves a purpose, right?
Yeah, and I woke up to that. I had been fired by the Federalist and Daily Wire, and a tweet by my publisher saying that we had gone our separate ways. So I was like, I had been fired by the Federalist. Well, I just recently found out that they said, no, we never fired you. We thought you quit.
Oh, are you kidding?
That's what they said. So I'm gonna take the high road and just say it was a misunderstanding. I guess I was never fired. I know I never quit.
Yeah.
And so I made a joke. I said, I guess I'm still a writer at the Federalist.
That's right. You still are on staff.
I'm still there. But no, I mean, I'm not. And the conversation I had recently was just, okay, well, I guess we just had a misunderstanding. Sorry about that.
Yeah, the kids call that a cope. It's called a cope. A big cope. Wow.
So I guess the Federalists didn't technically deplatform me or whatever, but anyway, but back to my analysis, the Federalists, I think the Federalists does a lot of good work, of course, like Daily Wire. It's almost very similar people, very connected. But again, I think the moral frame is slipping there. And that would be my, and the focus maybe of too much worrying about what the world thinks, too much worrying about what status in the world thinks by various writers there, fame, money, all that kind of stuff. I think that infects not just this organization, but many. It's not just a criticism of them. It's a criticism of the industry itself,
yes,
driven by, by name recognition and ambition, vainglory. I would just say that we can all get caught up in that,
yes.
And you have to guard against it because it can be blinding. It can make you compromise, and it can make you lose your values and lose your sight of what the fight really is all about.
Yes.
And the moral frame of that, I think, is very big. And again, a big millennial influence there, and fear of association. But they are good people doing good work, but they definitely, I think, will have lost sight, I think, of that moral compass.
Yes.
If I can say that. And I've been there. I mean, I've walked the road. I mean, I've been, in this business, a while now, and I understand all those temptations and struggles, and, and even in my writing, starting to write about Hollywood clickbait, to get noticed. And I understand all that, but it's not the battle we're in. And that's not winning the day. I mean, look at us, look at our country right now. It's going, obviously what you're doing is not working.
Yes.
You may be getting more wealthy, but it's not working.
Yes.
And, so something's not working, which is why I started, took a totally different direction. But I'd like to hear more about what happened, I'm sure, with YAF, with you and your thoughts on that.
I have talked a lot about it. I just, I was thinking a little bit about our sort of parallel plights. And I think that, this rush to come to the aid of a Yashar Ali, instead of, as you said so well, demonstrating grace because you and your work represent what are core Christian conservative values, and just weighing these two figures and choosing sides. It shouldn't even be a choice, right? There should be no competition, no hesitation whatsoever. And I felt the same way. It was a little bit like, as you said, feeling surprised and disappointed. I don't know why I felt as surprised as I did. Well, I thought you'd have my back, that type of thing.
You do, you think.
But adversity is very illuminating. And then it makes you cherish the friends that you thought you could count on that did come through, as well as a lot of total strangers, who come forth. And I mean, I just think, I don't know about your situation, but I just feel like, well, that's providence. This was God's timing. And, and just even just more the sort of secular simplification of it, that everything happens for a reason.
Well, and I don't know if it happened to you, but it definitely was a moment that God used to bring me closer to him.
Yes.
And to bring me back to him and back to his truth and his focus and his glory, not my own.
Yes.
And to speak for him and to speak of his truth and to fight with his armor, not with my own, and not cling so tightly to those associations and to those groups and those friendships that I thought I so desperately needed, or those positions. And just remember, that God is the one who's in control here. And that doesn't always mean you're going to be successful. It doesn't always mean you're going to be making a lot of money. You may be flipping burgers down at the local McDonald's.
Right.
So much.
Right. But
he's going to work through, and his ultimate desire for each one of us is not what happens on this grand stage, but what happens in our obedient walk with him, and following his ways. And that's got to come first. And so God kind of pulled me back through this to reevaluate that core relationship that I have, so that I can have better wisdom about the other relationships that I build in the work that I'm doing, and to be more wise. And I mess up daily, but y'all, I'm just telling you, I'm not sitting here on high saying,
Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, again, that's what makes us unique too. I mean, one of the problems with Con Inc., right, in general, is the sense that they have become gods, that they are infallible, and that they are the ultimate arbiters of truth and justice. And
who can speak? I mean, it's an idol worship of media figures. And I recently wrote a piece about that. It's like, as much as we should support one another, and when you're being attacked, support them, want people to have free voices, and all of the battle that we do daily. But we have got to keep in perspective and to hold on to these people loosely. If we lose them, it's not the end of the world.
Yes.
God is in control.
That is so important.
Idols of yourself if you're a media figure, and don't make an idol of media figures or politicians.
Amen. So
they come and go. They come and go.
They certainly do. We are all dispensable. This is a great segue to Romans1.com. Tell people more about what motivated you to establish the site and what people can find there.
Well, after I lost my jobs and was deplatformed, I still have my books that I was working on, and recently had a book published in the midst of all that. But I needed something with what was my daily work going to be. And, I was called by God by then. I just said, I need a different frame. And I wasn't finding it in any place that I could publish. I need somewhere where I can talk about cultural events, conservative events, conservatism, political, whatever it is, from a truly Christian perspective, and bring God's truth to bear on a culture that has suppressed his truth. And that's where we live. I mean, we really live in the context of Romans 1 and Paul's analysis of what happens in culture when you reject God's truth, that to be true. And that's key. It really is quite freeing when you realize, and you look around at all the insanity in the world. From how many genders do we have now? I lost count.
103, 104, 210. Yeah, right.
To what Marxism, to AOC spouting insanity, and Dianne Feinstein, is that they know the truth deep in their consciences. They know. They may have seared it, they have suppressed it, but it is there, and we need to speak to it. And one thing that kept coming to my mind is, instead of arguing, instead of worrying about building platforms and doing this and getting on the gerbil wheel, proclaim his truth. Proclaim it. Proclaim it fearlessly and boldly, and let God's Spirit do the work in re-energizing their consciences. I mean, fight the political battles. I mean, I'm not saying don't be doing all of that, but along with that, you have got to be proclaiming truth fearlessly. Christians have lost that. They've lost that in the culture, and they've lost it in politics, and they've lost it in their personal lives, which is why cancel culture works, because people are afraid to be associated. They don't speak out boldly about things because they're afraid of what people are going to think of them, or they're going to cut them out from the group, or fire them from the church, or lose their position. No, we need to be fearless in speaking the truth, because we live in an age of suppression of truth, in which idolatry of self, subjectivism, is the number one thing that rules our country. And it is fed by a lust and a desire for sin, from sexual sin to every other kind of sin that's listed in Romans 1. And we suppress that truth because we hate it, because we love our idol of self. And it's that subjectivism and rejection of objective truth and God's truth that is the rot at the core of our nation. Yes. And so I said, I want to build a platform that just speaks boldly to what's going on today. Not just my voice, but any voice of a Christian who is well educated and a good writer, who can say these things and understand how to bring scripture and God's truth to bear, to proclaim boldly in the days in which we live, and leave it there and let God do the work with it. Yes. And if it comes to sexuality, God made man male and female, period, done. That's the way it is. You do not get to reinvent your own identity as a human being or as a sexual being. God made you a certain way. When you pervert it in any way, by cutting up your body parts or doing whatever with your body parts, you are harming yourself. You're harming the other person. You're harming the society that God has put you in to really spread and live according to his true love.
Yes.
And that's key. The mandate to love is the human mandate. And we have lost that mandate because we've lost objective truth. We've lost a sense of ourselves. And we have lost our sense of real liberty. I mean, when you become a subjectivist, you are making your truth the only truth, right? The true truth. And suddenly my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth. So we have 5 billion truths on this planet.
Right.
That leads to chaos. That leads to war. Because we don't live in islands unto ourselves where I can be my own little truth. I have to work with other people.
Yes.
And so then it becomes a battle of truths. Whose subjective truth is going to win the day? That is what PC identity politics is. Mm-hmm. That is what cancel culture is about. It's whose subjective truth is going to win the day.
Yes.
Rally enough of the loudest voices who share maybe those points of objective truth with you. That's why we're all reductionistic. Whatever little tribal band around some certain subjective truths we can get to empower ourselves. Yes. That's the fight of the day. And you can't have that kind of state of being and promote love in this world. You simply can't.
Of course, our landscape has been racked by physical anarchy, for much of the year. But underneath that, of course, the collapsing foundation is moral anarchy. And it's the confusion, it's the despair, it's the anxiety, it's the depression. You've got these stories now daily of people who've been fed all the lies of moral relativism, and then they go and have these very drastic surgeries, and now they're having regret about it, and they can't go back. And of course, this is it's one thing if you're 20 or 30 and you do it, but now you've got 5 and 6 year olds who are being subjected to it. The thing is that there's so few people who speak with such clarity as you, Denise, who hold elected office. That's the problem, right? And I'm not just talking about Congress or the Beltway or the swamp. People in your local school boards, right? People in the school systems that are promoting all of this stuff. We were talking about our families and our kids are sort of your kids are on a little bit on the older side now, but as somebody who observes what's going on in the public schools, how do you put the genie back in the bottle?
I don't think there is putting it not as it is today. Like I said, subjectivism rules, which shoves logic and rationality out the window. Everything's about whatever subjective truth is ruling for the day, and whoever has the power to implement, and public schools are definitely part of that. I spent so many years fighting and undoing, because I couldn't afford to send my kids to private school, and I had so many kids. And so fighting and undoing what was going on in the public school system.
Yeah.
But it's gotten even since my kids graduated, it's gotten even worse. And so it really always does come back down to objective truth. And what are we teaching? Are we teaching right thinking? Are we teaching objective thinking and moral objectivity? But because it's all about self-worship and just the subjective tyranny of it all, we're unraveling.
Yes.
And we're unraveling, and there is no unraveling until we turn back and remember what we know to be true, that there is objective truth, and that the irony is that when we understand who God is, how he made us, that objective reality, it makes libertarians and all the rest of them and people who just don't want that, it makes them feel like I'm being caged. But the fact is, no, you're being freed. When you live according to something outside of yourself that's objective and true, you're free. When you don't, and you believe, and you're living according to your own subjective truth, you're going to be bound by someone else's subjective truth, because if they get power over you, that's the real bondage. Subjectivism leads to lack of liberty. And if you don't have liberty, you can't love. And I don't mean squishy wishy Hollywood gross love. I'm talking about the mandate and moral imperative of love that we are for each one of us. We're made in God's image. God is love. We are to love one another. Obedience to his moral code is part of that love. Being who we are designed to be is part of that love. Being responsible human beings and not blaming everybody else because you don't have what everybody else has. This desire and lust for equality of outcomes that's born of envy and malcontent attitudes because you don't have what everyone else has. Because you think that, again, that self-worship, I deserve certain things. I deserve, I'm entitled. No, you're not. No, you're not. And you're not going to have equality of outcomes. You cannot have that kind of equality. And your lust for it is only self-worship. And it's not loving others.
So I want to give you a little bit of time. We have about 10 minutes left to talk about the themes. And I know we've touched on them here sort of implicitly by inference of what men want to say to women, but can't. Give us a couple of examples.
Well, one of them has to do with what I was just talking about with equality, women in the workplace, this whole attitude of, I don't have equality. People and the feminists take disparity and make it seem like there's discrimination going on, totally ignoring that women make different choices. So men want to say to women, if you want true equality, then do the equal work, make the same choices we do the hard, dirty jobs, choose to be the CEOs like we do, which most women don't. It's a choice thing. It's not discrimination.
Right.
And stop, putting all the blame on men as if men are doing something to you because you're not the same as men. This is the problem with feminism in the workplace, and I know men don't understand, is that we clamored for equality of opportunity, which was right and true and good. And you and I have benefited from our former feminist foremothers. But the feminists today are all about equality of outcomes. And the problem is that when you do have true equality, you have competition. But competition, what becomes of competition? Inequality, because we're all so different and we make different choices. Women included make different choices. They act differently. They want to be moms. They do different things. So don't expect equality and demand equality and expect equal rights amendments to be put in because women are actually making different choices. It's not about discrimination. The other thing is let fathers be fathers. We don't want fathers to be mothers.
Yes.
Stop it. We need fathers. No, our country is suffering because we don't have strong fathers because they've been manipulated, feminized, beat down, reconstructed by psychologists in the APA saying that we need to reconstruct masculinity into some kind of soft, now modern technological mold. Who? No, we need strong masculine men and fathers. Another one when it comes to sex. Women, stop making men an image of yourself in bed. Let a man be a man. He's not going to respond the way you are. He's not going to do all the talkie-walkies like you want to do. Let a man be a man, and he's just a physical, visual creature.
Yes.
Love him as he is. If you're married to him, you love this man, right? So love him as he is and not how you want him to be. So these are just some of the things I unpack them a whole lot.
Yes. I thought about you because I happened upon a really cringe-inducing TikTok. I'm going to send it to you. And it was a bunch of young Gen Z users of TikTok all strung together, like those celebrity videos where they all mouth the same thing and they have these earnest looks on their faces. And it was so simpy. And young man after young man, teenager after teenager, all around the world saying, I respect women. I respect women. I'm like, I have no respect for you. I'm like, I do not want my son to, and he wasn't in the video and he would not be. But I'm like, where are the fathers to role model, to ensure that your son doesn't turn into this puddle of jello?
It's gross. I mean, and also, I don't know if you saw the campaign a while back where all the men were wearing "Future is Female."
Oh, yes, that. Yes.
I'm like, how self-annihilating is that?
Right. Yes, right. It's beyond self-loathing. It is self-annihilating.
The future, God, I hope it's not. The future isn't female, because it's. I love our species.
Right.
We need balance. We need a balance between the masculinity and the femininity, the male and the female, the binary, balance of it all. And women, just what they think that they have. The other problem with that is the future is a female in the political and in the social realm, the cultural realm, is based on a wrong understanding of competition. It actually eradicates competition and makes everything, entitled and forced and then equal outcomes. And that's the problem with these messages today from feminism, is it's all this cultural Marxist ideology at the root of it all, which is about equality of outcomes, which is a violation and will rob you of your liberty. And again, if we don't have liberty, we can't really function as true, moral, loving human beings as God designed. So we need to fight for that and fight against this. But men are manipulated, so easily. Because the minute you criticize it, you're a misogynist. I mean, I'm called daily. I'm called a misogynist daily because I criticize feminism. But feminism is not for the dignity of women. It's for equal outcomes, and actually undermines the dignity of women and men together.
Yes. So, I mean, is one solution that we always know that the secular neoliberals are always going to go too far. Right. And so you see this interesting dynamic, for example, with these transgender athletes who are ruining high school female sports, for example. And some of these young girls and their families are actually beginning to fight back in the public square, in court, and they're getting the daily slings and arrows that you get, that they're phobic, this and that, that they're not tolerant, et cetera, et cetera. And then you even see some, sort of card-carrying liberals being attacked. Martina Navratilova was a critic of, allowing every last transgender athlete to. I mean, what's the point of Title IX, right? I mean, there's no more women's sports. Is that one solution, that we just wait for them to, overplay their hand because they're going to?
Well, in that realm, it's interesting with intersectionality. It eats itself eventually, doesn't it?
Yeah, we see a lot of this cannibalism every day now. It's a nice white pill, occasional white pill. Yeah.
Will they ever reach? I mean, I think it will. Like anything in cultural movements and history, there's ebbs and flows and victories. It's more about the trajectory, and that's how I look at it. And I think in that area, there's overreach with the transgender, but the foundations of liberalism that have been laid in the mindset, this relativism, is so entrenched. Yeah, and now that I'm watching how people behave amid the COVID panic, they're such sheeple. Yes. and so afraid of offending, so afraid of being judged as being not a nice person. Gosh, we are just under the tyranny of niceness.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean I'm a nasty person. Right. This whole placating, appeasing kind of niceness, and and always thinking about what other people think of you, and this insecurity, this deep, deep insecurity that we have in our society and that we've built into this younger generations, but it's there in the older ones too now. So, I think that there may be some victories like you're talking about with transgender and the women, but I don't see it changing on the trajectory until some fundamental things are changed in our culture.
Yeah.
And churches are really pathetic. I think churches are weak now on the whole, of course, not specifically. The church as Christians you should be on the front lines of these things. And I see them cowering. And I've especially seen this in the last few months. It's very disturbing to me.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, literal cowering, right? I mean, these pastors of mega churches washing the feet of BLM domestic terrorists.
It's gross. I mean, it just, why do that? But it is, again, I think the church especially has really bought into this postmodern mindset of feelings and emotional that we've had, born of postmodernism. So it's really infected the churches. And again, instead of just looking at, like Paul says in Romans 1, we need to see what the culture really is and focus on Christ and him crucified and focus on God's truth and bringing it to bear in the culture. We also see a church that's only focusing on trying to do this relationship evangelism kind of stuff where you be nice with everyone and then you'll win them to Jesus. And so they're the people who won't get into the cultural battles, won't get into the cultural fray, won't get into being offensive. Yes. And what they don't understand is that, yes, we are to spread the gospel. Yes, we are to build relationships, but we also have another mandate, the creation mandate, that we are to take dominion over this planet in the name of Christ, in the name of God, through love. I mean, and that is what we're called to do, and we cannot do that if we're kowtowing to evil or we're manipulated by lies. And our job is to take dominion over culture, which is the world, which is our particular small frame of the world. And the way we do that, we are called to be loving influence and lights and salt in this world, not to just talk to people about Jesus, but also to talk about truth and love and to love our neighbors. And we can't love our neighbors in a relativistic society that is spreading lies. You have to, confront that.
Yes.
And Jesus said, I did not bring, and speaking of the gospel and speaking of truth, peace on this planet in that way. I brought a sword. It's going to cause division and conflict. So you're going to have Christians need to bone up. I mean, they need to get strong. They need to get ready for the fight instead of trying to make everyone like you.
Yes. Amen. Amen.
You don't go and be offensive. You don't go and be offensive on purpose, because Paul says you do not offend, but you are, but the gospel itself, the truth itself, to a people who have suppressed it, it is offensive. Yes. You're just going to have to speak it in love, speak it in grace, speak it in truth, but speak it boldly. And that doesn't mean washing the feet of Marxists.
Yes, exactly. The phrase, when it came into being, of virtue signaling, initially I used it. I found it very useful. The problem is that, everybody can signal virtue. It's so much harder to possess it and practice it. And, I think this is a great way to end too, because we end where we started, which is people's overwhelming concern with temporal judgment instead of eternal judgment. And that is the pathology that infects so many of these leftists, CEOs, and of course the people who tried and failed to cancel both of us, right? I mean, so my last question to you is, how do you, what's the vaccine, for the next generation of young people that we want to be these bold warriors, to inoculate them against this compulsion to seek the approbation of people around them instead of the one above them?
We have to train them up in the way that they won't go. And that involves teaching them truth. It involves them having, like you said, an eternal mindset, not just a temporal one. And understanding who they are is designed by God. They were made for a purpose. You are not your own, you're God's. And that's a glorious, wonderful, freeing thing. And that he made you to be a free will, thinking, loving human being. But that has got to be rooted in truth. And you have to keep your eyes focused on him and understand that we live in a sinful world. And there's no salvation of it apart from Christ. And that he is the way, the truth, and the life. And he has to be the guiding light in all that we do. He has to be. And it has to be for every individual. And so to abandon self-worship and worship the only one worthy of true worship in his truth, no matter how hard it is, no matter how many stones it's going to make you take, or friends you may lose, or money you may lose, and stand by the truth, imbibe his righteousness. Repent when you sin, seek forgiveness in him, show grace to each other along this path and this journey of sanctification that we have going on in this world. But cling to that solid island, like in Paralandra and C.S. Lewis. Get off of the floating islands that lead you to nowhere. Stand on his truth that's unchanging, and immutable, and that you can be sure of, and that's where you will find your freedom and your happiness and your joy.
Amen. I so enjoyed this discussion with you, Denise, and I am so inspired by your resilience and your faith and your humor through all of this. I mean, you've come through, and I wish you all the best in all you do. And I highly recommend that everybody go to romans1.com, follow you at McAllister Den, and also follow the Romans 1 Twitter account, which is Real Romans 1. And we are going to do this again for sure.
Thank you. It's so
All
great.
right. Thank you. Take care, Denise.
Thank you.